The room fell silent. Every conversation stopped mid-sentence. Every champagne glass froze halfway to every mouth. The distinguished guests of the Rothschild mansion, people who commanded boardrooms and bent politicians to their will, stood paralyzed as Vito Russo rose from his chair. His movement was slow, deliberate, the kind of motion that made predators in the wild circle back and reconsider their approach. He stood to his full height, his tailored Italian suit catching the chandelier light, and every eye in that gilded ballroom watched as the most feared man in the city extended his hand toward the trembling young woman in the maid's uniform. His voice, when it came, cut through the silence like a blade through silk. "Ma'am." That single word rewrote the entire hierarchy of power in the room. But to understand how a simple maid could command such respect from a man who made generals sweat and senators beg, we need to go back 3 hours earlier, when Clara Martinez first walked through those towering oak doors with nothing but a reference letter and a prayer. Clara's hands trembled as she gripped the leather portfolio containing her employment papers. The Rothschild estate sprawled before her like something from a fever dream, all marble columns and manicured gardens that probably cost more to maintain than her entire neighborhood saw in a year. She had grown up in the cramped apartments of the Lower East Side, where 3 families shared a bathroom and the sound of sirens was as common as birdsong. This world of old money and older power was as foreign to her as the surface of Mars. Mrs. Pemberton, the head housekeeper, led her through corridors lined with oil paintings worth more than Clara would earn in 10 lifetimes. The woman's heels clicked against the floor with metronomic precision, each step a reminder of the distance between Clara's world and this one. "You will address the guests as sir or madam. You will not speak unless spoken to. You will not make eye contact unless instructed. You will be invisible." Mrs. Pemberton's voice was crisp, efficient, devoid of warmth. "The Rothschilds are hosting their annual investment gala tonight. Senators, CEOs, foreign dignitaries. These are people who shape the world, Miss Martinez. Your job is to serve them without reminding them that people like you exist. Do you understand?" Clara swallowed the bitter taste of that instruction and nodded. Yes, ma'am. She understood perfectly. She had been understanding it her entire life. The other staff members barely acknowledged her as she changed into her uniform. Black dress, white apron, hair pulled back so tight it made her scalp ache. She caught her reflection in the staff bathroom mirror and barely recognized herself. She looked smaller somehow, diminished, as though the uniform had stripped away something essential. By 7 o'clock, the guests began arriving. Clara watched from her position near the service entrance as luxury cars deposited their cargo of wealth and influence. Women dripped with diamonds that could feed families for years. Men wore watches that cost more than houses. They moved with the casual confidence of people who had never been told no, never felt the gnaw of hunger, never lay awake wondering how to pay for their mother's medication. Clara's first assignment was to circulate with champagne. The crystal flutes felt impossibly delicate in her hands, and she gripped the tray with white knuckles as she stepped into the main ballroom. The space took her breath away. Chandeliers the size of cars hung from frescoed ceilings. A string quartet played in the corner. The combined net worth in that room could probably solve world hunger, and here it was casually sipping Dom Perignon and discussing yacht clubs. The first guest she approached was a woman in a gown that probably cost more than Clara's annual salary. The woman took a glass without looking at Clara's face, as though the champagne had simply materialized in her hand through an act of God. Clara moved to the next cluster of guests. This is where the evening began to curdle. A portly man with a red face and expensive cologne reached for a glass, and Clara, trying too hard to be accommodating, shifted the tray at exactly the wrong moment. Champagne sloshed over the rim, a few drops landing on his cufflinks. They were small drops, inconsequential, barely visible, but the man's reaction suggested she had dumped the entire tray on his head. "Good God!" His voice boomed across the immediate area, drawing attention like a beacon. The woman next to him, skeletal thin with a face that had seen too many surgeries, clutched her pearls in performative shock. Do they let anyone work here now? The Rothschilds must be hard up for help. Laughter rippled through the nearby guests. Clara felt her face burn. I'm so sorry, sir. I'll get a cloth right away. She began to turn toward the service area, but the man wasn't finished. No, stay. We're all curious now. The man gestured to the growing audience. Tell us, what exactly are your qualifications for this position? Can you even tell a champagne flute from a wine glass, or is that too advanced? More laughter. A woman in emeralds chimed in. Charles, be kind. I'm sure she knows the difference. She probably drinks wine from boxes at home. The group erupted in mirth at this observation, as though it was the height of wit. Clara stood frozen, the tray suddenly weighing 1,000 pounds. She wanted to disappear, to melt into the marble floor. But something in her refused to give them the satisfaction of seeing her cry. She kept her face neutral, her eyes down, and waited for the storm to pass. It didn't pass. It grew. A younger man, probably in his 30s, stepped forward. His smile was cruel. Sweetheart, let me give you some advice. His voice dripped with condescension. When you're serving people like us, you need to understand your place. We're not being mean. We're trying to help you. You're clearly not cut out for this kind of work. Maybe try something more suited to your background. Fast food, perhaps? I hear McDonald's is always hiring. The crowd loved this. They howled with laughter, slapping each other's backs, wiping tears from their eyes. Clara felt something crack inside her, but she couldn't afford to show it. She needed this job. Her mother's medical bills were piling up. Her younger brother needed books for school. She couldn't lose this position because some overfed aristocrats got their entertainment from humiliating the help. If you'll excuse me, she managed, her voice barely above a whisper, I have other guests to serve. She began to move away, but the portly man caught her arm. The contact was inappropriate, aggressive. She looked at his hand on her arm, then at his face. Not so fast. I think you owe me an apology, a proper one. On your knees would be appropriate, don't you think? He looked around at his companions, who nodded eagerly. Yes, on your knees. Show some respect for your betters. Clara's mind raced. She could feel the weight of every eye in that section of the ballroom. Some guests looked uncomfortable, but said nothing. Most looked entertained. This was dinner theater to them, a momentary diversion from the tedium of discussing stock portfolios and villa renovations. And then she saw him. In the corner of the ballroom, seated in a high-backed chair that looked more like a throne, was a man who didn't belong to the party's energy. While everyone else laughed and chattered and performed their wealth, he sat in perfect stillness, watching. He was perhaps in his mid-40s, with dark hair touched with gray at the temples. His suit was immaculate, but understated. No flashy cufflinks or ostentatious jewelry. But there was something about him that pulled at Clara's attention like gravity. His eyes met hers across the room. They were dark, unreadable. He wasn't smiling at her humiliation. He wasn't frowning either. He was simply watching, assessing, his expression as neutral as a mathematician studying an equation. Something about that gaze steadied her. She turned back to the portly man, whose hand still gripped her arm. Sir, she said quietly, I've apologized once. I'll do it again because I value my employment. I'm sorry for the inconvenience, but I won't kneel. Not for you, not for anyone. The man's face went from red to purple. The audacity! The absolute audacity! Do you know who I am? I'm Charles Whitmore. I own half the real estate in this city. I could buy and sell your entire family 10 times over. You will kneel, you insolent little... That's enough, Charles. The voice came from behind Clara. It was quiet, conversational, but it cut through the ballroom like a gunshot. Every head turned, the laughter died, even the string quartet seemed to play softer. The man from the corner had moved. He now stood just a few feet away, his hands casually in his pockets, his expression still that same neutral assessment. But something had changed in the room's atmosphere. It was as though someone had opened a door to winter. Charles Whitmore's grip on Clara's arm loosened immediately. His face lost some of its color. Vito... I didn't see you there. We were just having a bit of fun, no harm meant. Vito. The name hung in the air like a curse. Clara saw recognition flash across several faces, followed immediately by fear. The woman in emeralds took an involuntary step backward. The cruel young man suddenly found his shoes fascinating. Vito Russo looked at Charles Whitmore with the kind of attention a cat gives a mouse before deciding whether it's worth the effort to kill. Fun, he repeated, as though testing the word's flavor. You call this fun, Charles? Humiliating someone who can't defend herself without losing her livelihood? That's your idea of entertainment? Charles stammered. We didn't. It was just jokes, Vito, just having a laugh. You know how it is. Do I? Vito's gaze swept across the group. All of you. You stand here in your diamonds and your designer clothes, and you think that makes you better than her? You think your money bought you the right to treat other human beings like your personal jesters? No one spoke. No one even seemed to breathe. Vito turned to Clara. His expression softened just fractionally. Are you all right, miss? Clara, still clutching her tray, managed a nod. Yes, sir, thank you. He studied her for a moment longer, then stepped back. You may continue your duties, but first, let me get you a fresh tray. That champagne is probably warm by now. The gesture was small, but in that room, at that moment, it might as well have been a coronation. Vito Russo, whoever he was, had publicly defended her. More than that, he had shown her consideration, treated her like a human being worth caring about. Clara retreated to the service area, her mind spinning. Who was Vito Russo? Why did his mere presence turn Charles Whitmore and his cronies into stammering children? In the kitchen, she found out. Another server, an older woman named Rosa, pulled Clara aside. Her eyes were wide with a mixture of fear and awe. Do you know who that was? Do you know who just defended you? Clara shook her head. Rosa glanced around as though the walls might have ears, then leaned in close. Vito Russo. He's not like these other people. He doesn't own real estate or run companies. He owns people. The Mafia, Clara. He's the head of the Russo crime family. They control everything in this city. Politicians, judges, police chiefs. If Vito Russo tells someone to jump, they ask how high while they're already in the air. Clara felt her stomach drop. A mafia boss. She had been defended by a criminal, a man who probably had blood on his hands, who made his fortune through violence and intimidation, and yet he had treated her with more respect in 30 seconds than the legitimate businessmen and society matrons had shown her all evening. Rosa wasn't finished. Those people out there, they're terrified of him. They invite him to these parties because they're too scared not to. He doesn't need their approval. He doesn't need anything from them. But they need him for protection, for deals, for problems to go away. And you, she looked at Clara with something like pity, you just became very visible to him. Before you continue with the story, make sure to hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below telling us what you think will happen next. Will Clara's life change forever after catching Vito's attention? Let us know your predictions. For the next hour, Clara moved through the party like a ghost. The guests who had mocked her earlier now avoided her entirely, as though she carried a contagious disease. Others watched her with unveiled curiosity, whispering behind their hands. She caught fragments of conversations. Why would Vito care about a maid? One woman wondered aloud. Do you think she's connected to someone? Maybe her father works for him? No, her companion replied. I heard she's nobody, just some girl from the slums, which makes it even stranger. Dinner was announced, and Clara found herself assigned to serve the main dining room. The long table could seat 50, and tonight every chair was filled. Clara moved along the side of the room with other servers, delivering courses with mechanical precision. She tried not to look at Vito, who sat near the head of the table, but she could feel his presence like a magnetic field. The dinner conversation was the usual elite chatter. Stock markets, political maneuvering, who was sleeping with whose spouse. But then, between the main course and dessert, the conversation took a sharp turn. A silver-haired man, Clara recognized as Senator Morrison, stood abruptly, his face flushed with wine and anger. That's a lie, Marcus, an outright lie. You knew about the clause. You agreed to those terms. Marcus Chen, a technology mogul who'd made billions in Silicon Valley, slammed his palm on the table. I agreed to nothing of the sort. You tried to slip that amendment in at the last minute, hoping I wouldn't notice. Well, I noticed, and I'm not paying out $70 million for a deal you sabotaged. The senator's face went darker. Sabotaged? You arrogant son of a bitch. I could bear you with one call. One call. Try it, Marcus shot back. See what happens. I've got enough dirt on you to end your political career and put you in prison where you belong. The room had gone silent. This wasn't playful banter between rivals. This was genuine animosity, the kind that ended in lawsuits or worse. Clara, standing against the wall with her tray, watched the two men square off across the table. Other guests looked uncomfortable. Some tried to intervene with placating words, but neither man was listening. Mrs. Rothschild, the hostess, looked stricken. She glanced toward her husband, who seemed equally at a loss. This was their party, their reputation on the line, and two of the most powerful men in the city were about to come to blows in their dining room. Senator Morrison pointed a shaking finger at Marcus Chen. You think you're untouchable because you're rich. Let me tell you something, you upstart. Money doesn't buy everything. Power does. Real power. And I've got connections that would make your blood run cold. Marcus laughed, a bitter, ugly sound. Connections? Is that what you call the bribes you take? The backroom deals? You're a corrupt dinosaur. Your kind is dying out, and you can't stand it. The senator's hand moved toward his jacket, and for a heart-stopping moment, Clara thought he might actually be reaching for a weapon. The thought was absurd, ridiculous, but the tension in that room was thick enough to choke on. And then Clara did something she couldn't quite explain later, even to herself. She stepped forward. "Excuse me, gentlemen." Her voice wasn't loud, but in the silence it carried. Both men turned to stare at her. The entire table turned to stare at her. She felt 50 pairs of eyes boring into her, felt the weight of her presumption like a physical force. But she had started, and she couldn't stop now. "Who the hell are you?" Senator Morrison demanded. "Someone who's noticed something you both seem to have missed." Clara's heart hammered against her ribs, but she kept her voice steady. "You're both threatening each other with exposure. The senator has political power, Mr. Chen has financial power and information. You're at a stalemate. Neither of you can destroy the other without destroying yourself in the process." Marcus Chen's eyes narrowed. "What's your point, girl?" "My point," Clara said, "is that you're both acting like this is about winning. But if you were both honest for 5 seconds, you'd admit you need each other. The senator needs Mr. Chen's technology contracts to flow through his district, creating jobs and tax revenue that make him look effective. Mr. Chen needs the senator's influence to smooth regulatory hurdles and secure government contracts. You're not enemies. You're business partners having a dispute about terms." She paused, gathering her courage for the final push. "So, instead of destroying each other and losing everything, why don't you do what any reasonable partners would do? Renegotiate. Split the difference on the $70 million. Senator, you give up your amendment. Mr. Chen, you pay $35 million instead of nothing. You both save face, you both get something, and most importantly, you both stay in business together." The silence that followed was absolute. Clara realized what she had done. She, a maid, had just lectured a senator and a billionaire about business strategy in front of 50 of the most powerful people in the city. She had overstepped so catastrophically that she'd probably be fired before dessert was served. Senator Morrison stared at her as though she had grown a second head. Marcus Chen's expression was unreadable. Around the table, guests exchanged shocked glances. And then, from the head of the table, came a sound that made everyone jump. Slow, deliberate applause. All heads turned toward Vito Russo, who was clapping his hands together with measured appreciation, a slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Brilliant," Vito said. "Absolutely brilliant. The young lady just did in 30 seconds what you two couldn't do in 30 minutes. She identified the actual problem, proposed a rational solution, and did it all without the theatrical posturing. He stood up, and once again that dangerous silence descended. He walked slowly around the table until he stood next to Clara. She could smell his cologne, expensive and subtle. He looked at Senator Morrison and Marcus Chen. Gentlemen, I suggest you take her advice, because if you don't, if you continue this childish pissing contest and drag everyone in this room into your mess, I will be very disappointed, and you both know what happens when I'm disappointed. The threat was implicit, unspoken, but it hung in the air like a blade. Senator Morrison swallowed hard. Marcus Chen's jaw tightened, but both men nodded. $35 million. The senator said stiffly. The amendment is withdrawn. Agreed, Marcus said. We'll have our lawyers drop the new terms tomorrow. Vito nodded, satisfied. Then he did something that made Clara's breath catch. He turned to her and extended his hand, not to shake, but palm up, as though inviting her to place her hand in his. Ma'am, he said clearly, his voice carrying to every corner of the room. May I have the pleasure of knowing your name? The word ma'am hit the gathered elite like a thunderclap. Vito Russo, the man who made politicians sweat and CEOs growl, had just addressed a maid with the same respect he might show to a queen. Clara felt dizzy. She looked at his extended hand, then at his face. His expression was sincere, expectant. Clara Martinez, she managed. Her voice came out steady somehow, despite the earthquake happening in her chest. My name is Clara Martinez. Ms. Martinez, Vito smiled, and it transformed his face completely. He looked younger, less dangerous, almost warm. You have a remarkable mind. That solution you proposed showed insight and pragmatism, qualities that are sadly lacking in most people I encounter. He turned to address the entire table. Let this be a lesson to all of you. Intelligence and wisdom aren't the exclusive domain of those born into wealth. This young woman probably has more common sense in her little finger than half of you have in your entire bodies. And unlike most of you, she had the courage to speak truth to power, knowing it might cost her everything. He looked back at Clara. How much does Mrs. Rothschild pay you? Clara blinked. $15 an hour, sir. $15, Vito repeated, shaking his head. For someone who just prevented a political and financial bloodbath, that seems inadequate, don't you think? He reached into his jacket and pulled out a business card. The card was simple, elegant, with just a phone number printed in black on cream stock. He pressed it into Clara's hand. Call this number tomorrow. Ask for Vincent. Tell him I sent you. He'll arrange an interview for a position in my organization. The work is demanding, but the compensation is significantly better than $15 an hour. And more importantly, you'll be working with people who value intelligence over pedigree. Clara stared at the card. A job offer from a mafia boss. Everything she had been taught about right and wrong, about staying on the straight and narrow, screamed at her to refuse. But another part of her, the part that was tired of being invisible, tired of being mocked, tired of watching her mother work 3 jobs just to afford medication, that part whispered something different. Thank you, sir, she heard herself say. I'll call tomorrow. Excellent, Vito nodded. Now I believe dinner is concluded. Thank you, Mrs. Rothschild, for a most entertaining evening. He nodded to the hostess, who looked like she might faint, then walked toward the exit. The sea of guests parted for him automatically, none daring to impede his path. For a long moment after he left, no one spoke. Then the whispers started, quiet at first, but growing rapidly in volume. Clara found herself the subject of 100 hushed conversations, all speculating about what had just happened, what it meant, who she really was. Charles Whitmore, the man who had grabbed her arm earlier, approached her with obvious reluctance. His earlier bravado had evaporated entirely. Ms. Martinez, his voice began, obsequious,
I want to apologize for my behavior earlier. It was uncalled for, completely inappropriate. I hope you can forgive me." Before Clara could respond, the woman in emerald sidled up. "And I must apologize as well. We were simply in high spirits, you understand. No harm meant." She forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. One by one, the people who had mocked her earlier came to offer their regrets, their excuses, their desperate attempts to curry favor with someone who had caught Vito Russo's attention. Clara accepted their apologies with quiet grace, but she didn't forget. She would never forget. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. Clara finished her duties mechanically, her mind elsewhere. When the last guest finally departed and the staff began cleanup, Mrs. Pemberton pulled Clara aside. Her expression was complicated, equal parts suspicious and impressed. "I don't know what game you're playing, Ms. Martinez, but you've certainly made an impression. That was either the bravest or the stupidest thing I've ever seen a maid do." Clara met her gaze steadily. "I wasn't playing any game, ma'am. I was just trying to help." Mrs. Pemberton studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "Well, you're either going to go very far or end up very dead. Possibly both. Good luck to you, Ms. Martinez."
That night, Clara lay in her tiny apartment, staring at the water-stained ceiling, turning the business card over and over in her hands. Rosa had told her the truth. Vito Russo was dangerous. He was a criminal. Working for him would mean crossing a line she could never uncross. But he had also been the only person in that entire mansion who had treated her like a human being. The only one who had seen past the uniform to the person underneath. The legitimate businessmen, the pillars of society, they had mocked her, grabbed her, tried to humiliate her for sport. Vito Russo had defended her. More than that, he had recognized her intelligence, offered her opportunity. What do you think Clara should do? Should she take the job with Vito or play it safe? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like this video if you're enjoying the story so far. Morning came too quickly. Clara called in sick to the Rothschild estate, claiming a stomach bug. Then, with trembling fingers, she dialed the number on Vito's card. A man answered on the second ring. His voice was gravelly, professional. "Vincent speaking?" Clara took a breath. "My name is Clara Martinez. Vito Russo told me to call you about a position." There was a pause, then a low chuckle. "Ah, yes, the maid who told Senator Morrison and Marcus Chen how to beat her jobs. Mr. Russo said you'd be calling. Can you come to the Paramount building today at 2 o'clock, 17th floor? Yes, I can be there." "Good. Come alone. Wear something professional but not expensive. We're not trying to impress anyone. And Ms. Martinez?" Vincent's voice took on a more serious tone. "If you're having second thoughts, now is the time to walk away. Once you walk through our doors, once you see what we do and who we are, there's no going back to your old life. Do you understand?" Clara looked around her cramped apartment, at the medical bills stacked on the kitchen counter, at the eviction notice she'd been pretending didn't exist, at the photograph of her mother, worn and tired, smiling bravely despite the pain of her illness. "I understand," she said. "I'll be there at 2. The Paramount building was downtown, a sleek tower of steel and glass that housed law firms, investment banks, and, apparently, organized crime. Clara stood on the sidewalk at 155, staring up at the building's imposing facade. She wore her only good outfit, a simple gray dress she'd bought secondhand for job interviews. It was clean, pressed, professional. She looked like any other young woman trying to make it in the city. She could still walk away. She could go back to the Rothschilds, apologize for calling in sick, continue her life of invisibility and $15 an hour. Safe, predictable, soul-crushing. Or she could walk through those doors. Clara walked through the doors. The lobby was marble and chrome, intimidatingly expensive. A security guard at the desk looked at her with mild curiosity. She approached him, trying to project confidence she didn't feel. "I have an appointment on the 17th floor, Clara Martinez." The guard checked his computer, then nodded and handed her a visitor badge. "Elevators are to your right. The 17th floor suite is Paramount Consulting Group. Paramount Consulting Group. The name was generic, forgettable, perfect cover for whatever actually went on up there. Clara pinned the badge to her dress and walked to the elevators, her heels clicking against the marble. Each step felt momentous, irreversible. The elevator ride to the 17th floor took less than a minute, but felt like an eternity. When the doors opened, Clara found herself facing a reception area that looked like it belonged to any upscale business. Tasteful art on the walls, comfortable seating, a receptionist with perfect hair and a practiced smile. "Ms. Martinez?" The receptionist stood. "Mr. Russo is expecting you. Please follow me." Clara followed her down a hallway lined with closed doors. They passed what looked like ordinary offices, people working at computers, talking on phones. Everything appeared completely legitimate. If this was organized crime, it wore an excellent disguise. At the end of the hallway was a large corner office. The receptionist knocked once, then opened the door. "Mr. Russo, Ms. Martinez is here." Vito stood behind a massive desk, looking out the floor-to-ceiling windows at the city spread below. He turned as Clara entered, and his face broke into that same transformative smile from the previous night. "Ms. Martinez, thank you for coming. Please, have a seat." He gestured to a chair across from his desk. The receptionist withdrew, closing the door behind her with a soft click. Clara sat, acutely aware that she was now alone with one of the most dangerous men in the city. But strangely, she didn't feel afraid. Nervous, yes. Out of her depth, absolutely. But not afraid. Vito settled into his own chair, leaning back with casual elegance. "I'm glad you called. I wasn't sure you would. Most people in your position would have run the other direction." Clara found her voice. Most people probably haven't watched their mothers work themselves into chronic illness while rich people complain about their vacation homes. Last night showed me something about the world I thought I understood. "Oh, and what did it show you?" "That the people society tells us to respect, the pillars of the community, they're often the cruelest. And the people society tells us to fear," she paused, choosing her words carefully, "sometimes they're the only ones who see us as human beings." Vito studied her with those dark, intelligent eyes. "You're perceptive. That's good. It's also dangerous. Perceptive people tend to see things others would prefer stayed hidden. Can you live with that burden?" "I can, if it means I stop being invisible." He nodded slowly. "Let me be frank with you, Ms. Martinez. You've probably heard things about me, about my family, about what we do. Much of what you've heard is true. We operate outside the law in certain areas. We do things that would shock and horrify good, law-abiding citizens. But we also operate by a code. We protect our own, we honor our word, we don't prey on the weak or the innocent, and we don't tolerate disrespect." He stood and walked to the windows, hands clasped behind his back. The legitimate business world, the one you saw last night, they'll destroy lives for profit margins. They'll buy politicians to write laws that crush the poor. They'll foreclose on families and gentrify neighborhoods and ship jobs overseas, all while congratulating themselves on their civic virtue. At least, we're honest about what we are. Clara processed this. "So you're saying you're the lesser evil?" Vito turned back to her, and his smile was wry. "I'm saying evil is a matter of perspective, but I won't lie to you. Working for me is dangerous. You'll see things, you'll know things, and once you know them, you can never unknow them. Your innocence, whatever remains of it, will be gone." "What would I be doing?" Clara asked. "What's the position?" "For now, you'd be working with Vincent, my chief operations officer. He handles the legitimate side of our business. Real estate management, investment portfolios, consulting services. All completely legal. You'd be his assistant, learning how we operate, how we maintain our various enterprises. Later, if you prove yourself trustworthy and capable, there would be opportunities to move into more sensitive areas." "And the pay?" $80,000 a year to start, plus full benefits, health insurance that actually covers things. After 6 months, if you're performing well, we'll discuss a raise. After a year, profit sharing. Clara's breath caught. $80,000. She currently made
$31,000 working full-time for the Rothschilds. $80,000 would solve every problem she had. Medical bills, rent, her brother's education, everything. "Why me?" she asked. "You don't know me. I could be working with the police. I could be anyone." Vito returned to his desk and pulled out a folder. He opened it, and Clara saw pages of information. Her school records, her employment history, her family background. A chill ran down her spine.
"I've done my homework, Miss Martinez. I know you graduated top of your high school class. I know you were accepted to 3 universities but couldn't attend because your mother got sick and you needed to work. I know you've held 4 jobs in the past 2 years, always showing up on time, always working hard, and always leaving because the pay wasn't enough to cover your family's expenses. I know you've never been arrested, never done drugs, never even gotten a parking ticket." He closed the folder. "More importantly, I watched you last night. You had every reason to stay silent, to let those powerful men destroy each other. But you stepped forward and solved a problem that wasn't yours to solve, knowing it might cost you your job. You did it because it was the right thing to do, because you saw a way to help. That's the kind of person I want working for me, someone with intelligence, courage, and a moral compass that actually points somewhere." Clara looked at the folder, then at Vito. "You're offering me a chance to change my life completely." "Yes, and all I have to do is work for a criminal organization?" Vito smiled. "I prefer family business, but yes, essentially. The question you need to ask yourself, Miss Martinez, is whether you're willing to compromise your principles for the sake of your survival and the well-being of your family. There's no wrong answer. Some people can't do it, and I respect that. But I think you're more pragmatic than you give yourself credit for." He was right. She was pragmatic. She'd had to be, growing up the way she did. Principles were a luxury of the comfortable. When you were choosing between integrity and insulin, the choice became remarkably clear. "When would I start?" Clara asked. Vito's smile widened. "Tomorrow, if you're ready. We'll need you to sign some paperwork, non-disclosure agreements, employment contracts, the usual. Vincent will give you the complete orientation. Fair warning, he's going to test you, try to intimidate you. It's his way of vetting new people. Don't let him rattle you." "I'll be ready," Clara said. "Excellent." Vito stood and extended his hand. "Welcome to the family, Miss Martinez. I think you're going to do very well here." Clara shook his hand. His grip was firm, warm, nothing like the cold ruthlessness she had expected. As she left the office, her mind was already racing ahead, thinking about how to tell her mother, how to explain her new job, how to process the seismic shift her life had just taken. The next 6 months passed in a whirlwind. Clara threw herself into her work with Vincent, who turned out to be exactly as advertised. He was gruff, demanding, constantly testing her knowledge and her nerves. But she learned quickly. She absorbed everything like a sponge: property management, portfolio diversification, the intricate web of shell companies and legitimate businesses that formed the backbone of the Russo family's empire. She also learned the darker side: the protection rackets that were dressed up as security consulting, the loan operations that charged interest rates that would make a shark blush but were technically legal, the political contributions that bought influence and turned elected officials into puppets. It should have bothered her more than it did. Some nights, lying in her new apartment that she could actually afford, she wondered if she was losing pieces of herself. But then she'd think about her mother's medical bills, all paid now, her brother's college acceptance letter, the weight that had lifted from her shoulders. And she thought about Vito. She saw him regularly now. He made a point of checking in on her progress, asking her opinion on various business matters. Their conversations ranged from mundane operational details to philosophy and ethics. He treated her as an equal, valued her insights, never once made her feel like the scared maid he'd met at the Rothschild estate. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss what happens next between Clara and Vito. And if you're enjoying this story, give us a like and let us know in the comments which part has been your favorite so far.
6 months into her employment, Clara was called into Vito's office for her review. She entered expecting the usual performance discussion, maybe the promised raise. What she got was something entirely different. Vito wasn't alone. 3 other men sat around his conference table, all of them radiating the same quiet danger that Vito possessed. These were his inner circle, Clara realized, the real power structure of the organization. "Miss Martinez, have a seat." Vito gestured to an empty chair. "I want you to meet some colleagues. This is Marco, my head of security. That's Paolo, who oversees our international operations. And you know Vincent." Clara sat, maintaining her composure despite the intensity of the room. She'd learned early on that showing weakness in this environment was a mistake. These men respected strength, competence, confidence. "Vincent's been singing your praises," Vito said. "Says you've exceeded every expectation. You're intelligent, discreet, and most importantly, loyal. Is that accurate, Vincent?" Vincent nodded. "She's a natural, sharp as they come. I'd trust her with anything at this point." "High praise from Vincent," Vito said. "He doesn't give compliments lightly. Which brings me to why you're here. We have a situation that requires someone with your particular combination of intelligence and, let's call it, social mobility. Someone who can move between different worlds without raising suspicion." Clara leaned forward slightly. "I'm listening." Marco spoke for the first time. His voice was rough, like gravel under tires. "We're having problems with a judge. Judge Patricia Holloway. She's presiding over a case that's sensitive to our interests. We need to ensure the verdict goes a certain way." Clara felt a chill. "You want me to bribe a judge?" Vito had his shed. "Judge Holloway can't be bribed. We've tried. She's that rarest of creatures in the judicial system, someone with actual integrity. No, we need something more subtle. We need information. Leverage." Paolo leaned back in his chair. "Judge Holloway has a daughter, Rebecca, 28 years old, works in marketing, lives in the city, attends the same charity galas that the Rothschilds used to invite you to. We need someone to befriend her, get close to her, find out if there's anything in the family that we can use." This was it, Clara realized. The line. Helping with legitimate business was one thing. This was something else entirely. This was active participation in criminal activity. This was using someone's personal relationships as weapons. She looked at Vito. "What happens if I say no?" Vito's expression didn't change. "Then you say no. You can continue working with Vincent on the legitimate operations. Your employment won't be terminated, your salary won't be reduced, but you also won't advance beyond your current position. This is the test, Miss Martinez. This is where we find out whether you're truly one of us or just someone passing through." Clara's mind raced. She thought about her mother, healthy now, finally able to enjoy life without constant pain. She thought about her brother, excelling in his freshman year at university. She thought about her own transformation from invisible maid to valued professional. And she thought about Judge Holloway's daughter, Rebecca, who was about to become a pawn in a game she didn't even know existed. "What exactly do you need me to find out?" Clara asked quietly. Vito's eyes gleamed. "Anything we can use. Family secrets, financial problems, affairs, addictions. Everyone has something they want to keep hidden. Find it, and we can ensure the judge rules in our favor without anyone getting hurt." Clara took a deep breath. "How much time do I have?" "The trial begins in 3 months," Marco said. "We need information in 2. Clara nodded slowly. "I'll do it, but I want something in return." Vincent raised an eyebrow. "You're negotiating? Bold." Vito smiled. "I taught her well. What do you want, Miss Martinez?" "If I do this successfully, I want a seat at this table. Not metaphorically, actually. I want to be part of the inner circle. I want decision-making authority." Clara's voice was steady, firm. "You said I'm intelligent, discreet, and loyal. Prove you meant it. Make me one of your advisors." The room went silent. Marco and Paolo exchanged glances. Vincent looked impressed, despite himself. Vito studied her with those unreadable dark eyes. Then he laughed, a genuine sound of delight. "You continue to surprise me, Miss Martinez. Most people in your position would ask for money. You're asking for power." He leaned forward. "Done.
Get me what I need and you'll have your seat. I give you my word. Clara stood and shook his hand. Then we have a deal. The next 2 months were a masterclass in social engineering. Clara used her legitimate consulting job as cover, attending the same charity events and fundraisers that Rebecca Holloway frequented. She engineered a meeting that seemed coincidental, struck up a conversation about art, discovered they had similar tastes in books and music. Rebecca was warm, friendly, eager for companionship. She'd recently gone through a difficult breakup and was lonely. Clara became her confidant, her friend, someone she trusted. And Clara hated herself for it. Because Rebecca was genuinely kind. She volunteered at animal shelters. She donated to homeless charities. She was exactly the kind of person Clara would have wanted as a real friend in another life. But Clara had a job to do. It took 6 weeks before Rebecca, after too much wine one evening, confided her deepest secret. Her father, the Honorable Judge Holloway, had a gambling problem. Not at casinos, where it might be noticed. Online poker, hidden accounts, losses that had nearly bankrupted the family years ago. He'd gotten help, gone through treatment, been clean for 5 years, but the evidence was still there. Bank records, credit card statements, treatment facility records. If it became public, it would destroy his reputation, possibly his career. Clara delivered the information to Vito with a heavy heart. He received it with satisfaction, immediately setting his people to work gathering documentation, building the case they needed. The day before the trial began, Judge Holloway received an anonymous package. Inside were copies of all his old gambling records, along with a simple note. We would hate for this information to become public. Perhaps you should reconsider your position on certain matters. The trial went exactly as Vito's organization needed it to. The judge, faced with the destruction of everything he'd worked to rebuild, ruled in their favor. The defendant, one of the Russo family's associates, walked free on a technicality that Judge Holloway himself created. Clara kept her friendship with Rebecca for appearances, but something had broken inside her. She'd crossed a line she could never uncross. She'd betrayed someone innocent, someone who had shown her nothing but kindness. When Vito called her into his office to honor their agreement, she entered with mixed emotions, pride at her success, shame at her methods, and underneath it all, a growing realization of who she was becoming. The inner circle was assembled again. This time, Clara sat at the table with them, not as a visitor, but as an equal. Vito raised a glass. To Clara Martinez, he said, who came to us as a maid and has proven herself worthy of power. Welcome to the family, truly, this time. They all drank. Clara drank with them, the wine tasting like ashes in her mouth. Over the next year, Clara rose higher in the organization. She advised on business strategies. She helped negotiate deals with other families. She became Vito's right hand, the one person he trusted above all others. She was respected, feared, powerful. She was also miserable. The money was good, the position was impressive, but every decision she made, every plan she helped execute, came with a moral cost. People lost their businesses when the Russo family decided to expand into their territory. Families were destroyed when debtors couldn't pay their loans. Lives were ruined, all in service of maintaining power and profit. And she was complicit in all of it. One evening, 18 months after that night at the Rothschild estate, Clara found herself alone with Vito in his office. They'd just concluded a particularly difficult negotiation with a rival organization, one that had ended with threats of violence if terms weren't met. Vito poured them both whiskey, expensive scotch that probably cost more than Clara used to make in a month. He handed her a glass and settled into his chair. "You're troubled," he observed. Clara didn't deny it. "Do you ever regret the choices you've made, the path you've taken?" Vito considered the question. "Every day. Every single day." He took a sip of his scotch. "But regret is a luxury. I was born into this life, Clara. My father was in this business, his father before him. I didn't have the option to be anything else. You, though, you chose this. You walked through my door knowing what I was. I chose it because I was desperate, because I saw no other way." "That's always how it starts," Vito said. "Desperation, need.
The legitimate world offers people like us nothing but contempt and poverty. So we find another way. We build our own world with its own rules. And yes, sometimes innocent people get hurt. Sometimes we do terrible things. But we survive. We take care of our own. That has to count for something. Does it? Clara asked. Does it really count if we destroy others to survive? Vito looked at her with something like sadness. That's the question, isn't it? The one that keeps you up at night, the one that will eventually force you to make a choice about who you want to be. What choice did you make? Clara asked. I chose power over principle, security over morality. I live with that choice every day. He finished his scotch. But here's what I've learned. The legitimate world, the one that judged you for being a maid, the one that mocked you and grabbed you and treated you like trash, they're no better than us. They just have better publicity. That doesn't make what we do right. No, Vito agreed. It doesn't. But it makes it understandable. And maybe, in this broken world, that's the best we can hope for. So what do you think? Should Clara stay in this life or try to leave? Drop a comment with your thoughts and make sure to hit that like button if you're still with us. 2 years after that fateful night at the Rothschild estate, Clara found herself attending another high society gala. But this time, she wasn't the help. She was a guest, invited in her capacity as a consultant for the Russo family's legitimate business interests. She wore a designer gown, diamond earrings, her hair was professionally styled. She looked like she belonged in this world of wealth and privilege, and in a way, she did now. She had money, status, power, and she was absolutely miserable. The same people who had mocked her 2 years ago now fawned over her. Charles Whitmore, the man who'd grabbed her arm, approached her with his wife, all smiles and false charm. Miss Martinez, or should I say Ms. Martinez, I've heard such impressive things about your consulting work. The Russo organization is lucky to have someone of your caliber. Clara looked at him with cold eyes. Mr. Whitmore, how nice to see you again. I trust your cufflinks have recovered from our last encounter. He had the grace to look embarrassed. Ah, yes, water under the bridge, I'm sure. We were all just having a bit of fun that night. Fun, Clara repeated. Is that what you call humiliating someone for your entertainment? She kept her voice pleasant, conversational, but there was steel underneath. Tell me, Mr. Whitmore, do you remember what you said to me that night? About my place? About how I should be working at McDonald's? Charles Whitmore's face went pale. That was inappropriate. I apologize. You apologize now, Clara said. Now that I'm someone you think matters. Now that I'm associated with people you fear. But if I were still that maid, if I still had no power, would you apologize then? Or would you still be making jokes about boxed wine and fast food? He had no answer. His wife pulled at his arm, murmuring something about needing to greet other guests.
They fled, and Clara watched them go with a mixture of satisfaction and emptiness. She'd won. She'd climbed from the bottom to a position of respect and influence. People who'd once mocked her now feared her. She should have felt triumphant. Instead, she felt hollow. Vito found her on the balcony later, staring out at the city lights. He stood beside her, silent for a moment, then spoke. I saw your exchange with Whitmore. Well handled. Was it? Clara asked. All I did was make him afraid. That's not respect. It's not redemption. It's just power. Sometimes power is all we have, Vito said. You wanted to stop being invisible. You wanted to matter. Mission accomplished. But at what cost? Clara turned to face him. I've become exactly what I despised. I manipulate people. I ruin lives. I help maintain a system that hurts innocent people. The only difference between me and those guests who mocked me is that I'm more honest about my cruelty. Vito's expression was unreadable. Are you thinking about leaving? Would you let me? Clara asked. He was quiet for a long moment. If you wanted to leave, really wanted to, I wouldn't stop you. You've proven your loyalty. You've kept our secrets. I'd set you up somewhere safe, somewhere you could start fresh. His voice took on a more serious tone. But you need to understand something. You can leave the organization, but you can't leave what you've become. The knowledge you have, the things you've done, they're part of you now. There's no going back to being that innocent girl who walked through my door. So I'm trapped? Clara said bitterly. Either I stay in this life or I leave and carry the weight of it forever. Vito shook his head. You're not trapped, you're transformed. There's a difference. The question isn't whether you can go back. You can't. The question is what you do with who you've become. He paused, then continued. You could use your position for good, Clara. You have influence now, real influence. You could push for changes within the organization. We're not monsters. We can be pragmatic. If you want to minimize harm, find ways to make our operations more ethical, I'd listen to you. You've earned that right. Clara looked at him. You're saying I could reform a criminal organization from within? I'm saying you have a choice. You can see your position as a curse or as an opportunity. Yes, you've done things you're not proud of, but you're also in a position where you can actually make a difference. How many people can say that? Clara considered this. It was seductive, the idea that she could somehow redeem herself while remaining in the life, that she could use her power for good instead of just profit. But she also knew it was a rationalization, a way to make herself feel better about the choices she'd made. The organization was what it was. She couldn't change its fundamental nature any more than she could change her own past. I need time, she said finally. Time to think about what I want, who I want to be. Take all the time you need, Vito said. But Clara, whatever you decide, know this. You impressed me that night at the Rothschilds, and you've impressed me every day since. You're brilliant, brave, and capable of greatness. Don't let guilt destroy what you've built. Learn from it, grow from it, but don't let it define you. He left her alone on the balcony. Clara stood there for a long time, watching the city below, thinking about the girl she'd been and the woman she'd become, thinking about power and principle, survival and morality, the price of ambition and the cost of integrity. She had come so far from that scared maid clutching a tray of champagne. She had wealth, respect, influence. She had everything she thought she wanted. And she had lost something essential in the process, some part of herself that believed in simple right and wrong, that saw the world in clear moral terms. That innocence was gone, shattered by compromise and corruption. But maybe Vito was right. Maybe she couldn't go back. Maybe the only way forward was to accept what she'd become and try to make it mean something better, use her position to minimize harm, push for more ethical practices, be the voice of conscience in an organization that desperately needed one. It wasn't redemption, it wasn't absolution, but it was something, a path forward that acknowledged her past while trying to create a better future. Clara made her decision. She would stay, not because she had no other choice, but because she chose to. She would use her power to push for better, to be the conscience the organization lacked. It wouldn't erase what she'd done, nothing could, but it might give her life meaning beyond mere survival. She turned from the balcony and walked back into the gala. Her head was high, her steps were confident. She was no longer the invisible maid, but she was also no longer the woman who had lost herself in the pursuit of power. She was something new, something in between, someone who understood both worlds and could perhaps build a bridge between them. The guests parted for her as she moved through the crowd, some out of respect, some out of fear. But they all saw her, really saw her. Clara Martinez, who had started as nothing and become someone impossible to ignore. She found Vito near the bar, engaged in conversation with a senator. When he saw her approaching, he excused himself and turned to her with raised eyebrows. "Well?" he asked. "I'm staying," Clara said, "but on one condition." "Name it." "We start making changes, real changes. I want to review every operation, every deal, every arrangement. Anything that can be made more ethical without compromising our security gets changed. We minimize harm wherever possible. We become better, even if we can't become good." Vito studied her face. "That's a tall order. Some people in the organization won't like it." "Then they'll have to get used to disappointment," Clara said firmly, "because I'm not spending the rest of my life as someone I can't stand to look at in the mirror. If I'm going to be part of this, I'm going to try to make it better. That's non-negotiable."
Vito was quiet for a moment, then he smiled. That same transformative smile that made him look younger, almost vulnerable. You know what? I think that's exactly what this organization needs. Someone who still believes we can be better. Someone who hasn't completely lost their moral compass. He extended his hand. You have my support. Carte blanche to review and reform whatever you think needs reforming. You'll face resistance, but I'll back you. Always. Clara shook his hand, feeling the weight of the commitment she'd just made. It wouldn't be easy. There would be pushback, conflicts, maybe even danger from those who profited from the old ways. But for the first time since she'd entered this world, she felt like she had a purpose beyond survival. In the weeks that followed, Clara threw herself into her new mission with the same intensity she'd brought to everything else. She reviewed loan operations and pushed for more reasonable interest rates. She examined protection rackets and insisted on providing actual security services for the money collected. She investigated the supply chains and cut ties with operations that involved human trafficking or exploitation of minors. Not everything could be changed. Some aspects of the organization's operations were too deeply embedded, too essential to its survival. But Clara found that she could make meaningful differences at the margins. Lives that would have been destroyed were merely disrupted. Businesses that would have been crushed were given second chances. It wasn't redemption, but it was something. She also found unexpected allies. Marco, the head of security, who had initially been skeptical of her, became one of her strongest supporters. He'd been in the life his entire adult life and had seen the worst of what the organization could do.
He was hungry for a way to make it better, to feel like he was building something instead of just enforcing fear. Paolo, who oversaw international operations, was harder to win over. He'd built his reputation on ruthlessness and saw Clara's reforms as weakness. But even he couldn't argue with the results. The organization's reputation improved. They attracted better quality business partners. Law enforcement scrutiny decreased slightly when the family's operations became less blatantly harmful. 6 months into Clara's reform efforts, she received an unexpected visitor at the office. Rebecca Holloway, Judge Holloway's daughter, the woman Clara had befriended and betrayed. Clara's assistant announced her with obvious nervousness, knowing that this wasn't a scheduled appointment. Clara steeled herself and told her to send Rebecca in. Rebecca entered the office looking thinner than Clara remembered, her face drawn with stress. She closed the door behind her and stood there for a moment, just looking at Clara. I know what you did, Rebecca said finally. Her voice was quiet, controlled, but Clara could hear the hurt beneath it. I know you became my friend just to get information about my father. I know you're the reason he received that package, the reason he had to compromise himself to protect our family. Clara felt her stomach drop. How did you find out? Does it matter? Rebecca's eyes were bright with unshed tears. I trusted you. I thought we were friends, real friends. And the whole time, you were just using me. Rebecca, I'm sorry. Those words are inadequate, I know, but I am truly deeply sorry for what I did to you, to your father. You didn't deserve that. You were kind to me, and I repaid that kindness with betrayal. Sorry doesn't fix what you broke, Rebecca said. My father is a shell of who he was. He ruled in favor of a criminal because you people threatened to destroy him. He violated his oath, his principles, everything he believed in, and it's eating him alive. I know, Clara's voice was hoarse, and if I could undo it, I would, but I can't. All I can do is acknowledge the harm I caused and try to be better going forward. Rebecca laughed bitterly. Better? You work for criminals, Clara. You're one of them now. How exactly are you going to be better? By using my position to minimize harm, by pushing for reforms, by trying to make a corrupt system slightly less corrupt. Clara met Rebecca's eyes. It's not redemption. It's not enough, but it's what I can do. Rebecca shook her head. You really believe that, don't you? You think you can somehow make organized crime ethical. That's not noble, Clara. That's just delusional. Maybe it is, Clara admitted, but it's the only path forward I can see. I can't leave. I know too much. I've done too much. And I can't just keep doing what I was doing without trying to make it better.
So yes, maybe I'm delusional, but at least I'm trying. Rebecca studied her for a long moment. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out a flash drive. She set it on Clara's desk. That contains copies of everything your organization has on my father, all the evidence you used to blackmail him. I want it destroyed. All of it. Physical copies, digital copies, every trace. Clara looked at the flash drive. And if I do this, if I destroy the leverage we have, then maybe I'll believe you're actually trying to be better, Rebecca said. Maybe I'll think there's still something human left in you. Or maybe I'll just know that my father can sleep at night without worrying about his past being exposed. Clara picked up the flash drive. This goes against everything I'm supposed to do. Vito trusted me with this information. Using it was my initiation into the inner circle. Destroying it undermines our leverage, our security. I know, Rebecca said. That's why it matters. Anyone can make grand promises about reform when it costs them nothing. But are you willing to sacrifice something that matters to you? Are you willing to take a real risk for what's right? Clara looked at Rebecca, then at the flash drive, then back at Rebecca. She thought about power and principle, about the compromises she'd made and the ones she refused to make going forward. I'll destroy it, she said finally. All of it. You have my word. Rebecca's expression didn't change. Your word doesn't mean much to me anymore, Clara, but I'll hold you to it anyway. You have 1 week. She turned to leave, then paused at the door. For what it's worth, I did consider you a friend, before I knew the truth. You were kind, funny, easy to talk to. That person you pretended to be, I wish she was real. Rebecca left. Clara sat alone in her office, holding the flash drive, feeling the weight of what she'd just promised. Destroying this evidence would anger Vito. It would undermine her position. It might even put her in danger from those in the organization who valued security above all else. But Rebecca was right. Reform couldn't just be words and minor policy adjustments. It had to cost something. It had to mean something. That evening, Clara went to Vito's office. She found him alone reviewing financial reports. He looked up when she entered and immediately sensed something was wrong. What happened? Clara closed the door and sat down. Rebecca Holloway came to see me today. She knows what I did, what we did. Vito's expression hardened. How? Does it matter? Clara placed the flash drive on his desk. She wants us to destroy all the evidence we have on her father. Every copy, physical and digital. And I told her we would. Vito picked up the flash drive, examining it. You told her we'd destroy our leverage on a federal judge without consulting me? Without getting approval from the council? Yes. Do you understand what you're asking? That judge could turn on us. He could use his position to come after the organization now that he's free from our control. He won't, Clara said. He's a good man who was forced into a terrible position. If we let him go, he'll be grateful. He'll leave us alone. But if we keep holding this over him, we're just creating an enemy who will eventually find a way to destroy us. Vito leaned back in his chair. This is more than strategic thinking, isn't it? This is about your guilt, about trying to make amends for what you did to Rebecca. Yes, Clara admitted. It is. But it's also about proving my reform efforts are real, that I'm willing to sacrifice something that matters. If I can't do this, if I can't let go of one piece of leverage to right one wrong, then all my talk about making the organization better is just empty words. Vito was quiet for a long time. Then he opened a drawer in his desk and pulled out a lighter. He held it up, then set the flash drive on his desk and lit it to fire. They watched together as the plastic melted and burned. I'll have Marco track down the physical copies and destroy them. I'll personally delete the digital files from our servers. Judge Holloway is free. Clara felt relief wash over her. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, Vito said. This is going to cause problems. Paolo will be furious. Some of the others will see it as weakness. You're going to face challenges to your authority. I know, but it's worth it. Vito smiled slightly. You really have changed, haven't you? The scared maid that walked into my office would never have taken a risk like this. She would have protected herself, played it safe. That scared maid learned that playing it safe just means staying invisible. And I'm done being invisible. But I'm also done hurting innocent people for no reason other than maintaining power. If that makes me weak in some people's eyes, so be it. It doesn't make you weak, Vito said. It makes you dangerous to people like Paolo, to the old guard, to anyone who profits from cruelty. You're showing them there's another way, and that's the most threatening thing you could do. Then I guess I'd better be ready for the fight. 3 years after that night at the Rothschild estate, Clara stood at the same balcony where she'd had that conversation with Vito about staying or leaving. But now, everything had changed. She wasn't questioning her place anymore. She had found it, carved it out through determination and courage and the willingness to fight for something better. The city spread out below her, millions of lights representing millions of lives, each one a story, each one mattering. She had learned that power without purpose was just destruction, that change was possible even in the darkest places, that redemption wasn't a destination, but a journey. She thought about the young woman on the street she'd given her business card to. Last week, that woman had called. Her name was Maria, and she'd just started training at Clara's consulting firm. In a few months, she'd be earning more than she'd ever imagined possible. And maybe, just maybe, she'd use that opportunity to help someone else. That's how change happened. One person at a time, one choice at a time, one moment of courage leading to another. Clara had started this journey as a maid who the guests laughed at. She'd become someone the feared Mafia boss called Ma'am, and now she was becoming the person she was always meant to be, someone who used power to lift others up, someone who remembered where she came from, someone who proved that even in darkness, even in compromise, even in moral complexity, you could still choose to be better. If you made it to the end of this story, thank you for watching. What did you think of Clara's journey? Did she make the right choices? Let us know in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss another story. We have more incredible tales coming your way. Until next time.